Hey, y'all. I'm Dr. Patrice Berry, licensed clinical psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. Thank you so much. And I will be covering this on Tuesday. So I will be covering the Piers Morgan interview with Fiona Harvey. There are allegations that she might be who the show Baby Reindeer was based on. If you're gonna go and watch that, I the way they depict emotional stalking, and then episode 4 is very, very triggering. So, I am still figuring out how much of it I can watch. I watched a lot of coverage on it, and I did watch the whole interview with her, and I have some thoughts. So we are definitely, definitely going to cover that. Whoa. Um, Demi D, thank you for that comment. I know that, so this case is about uh, the unaliving of Christopher Gregor's son, Corey. And his mother, she tried to have somebody see that things were not okay. And unfortunately, within, because she dropped him off at 9 a.m. and he is unresponsive and being brought into the hospital at 3 p.m. and he's pronounced deceased at 5 p.m. And it's my understanding that the medical reports show that it was likely blunt force trauma, that something happened to him within that period of time. There's like a I think they said like 5 to 12 hour period of time, and based on everything we've seen, based on that horrific treadmill video, it's likely that, and so Christopher's innocent until proven guilty. There's a lot of horrific evidence in this, and even the defense has said that the jury is not going to like Christopher. And the way that he's sitting there, so he's another one of those very controlled, like he looks menacing to me, and he is just staring people down. Now, when his mother is up talking, he seems to like soften a little, and it sounds like he was close to his mom. There is the testimony that we're gonna take a look at today. Once we get through this video right here, the testimony is by Christopher Gregor's mom and his dad. And the defense wants to get certain statements, they want to get certain evidence in. I really think the defense is trying to avoid Christopher having to get on the stand. If he gets on the stand, 'cause I don't think he's gonna come across well to the jury. I think he comes across, in my opinion, he comes across very, very angry. I and then it lets the state cross-examine him, and, he's just ugh. So, he allegedly, or not allegedly, it happened. So, Brianna, the mother of Christopher, became pregnant when she was 16 years old. There are some allegations about whether or not it was consensual. I do not know that for sure. There were no legal charges related to that. He did not find out about the pregnancy until Corey was about 4 years old. And then at 6 years old, he moves out of his parents' house, they get their own apartment, and then, and based on the way that some people describe Corey, it sounds like he had a bunch of energy. It sounds like he sometimes maybe had trouble sitting still, paying attention. He was exposed to some neglect with his mom, which she admits. His mother admits her history, and she is now sober. And oh, it's just very, very sad case. Very, very sad case. And the defense is trying to say that Brianna took Corey out of the hospital and he was showing signs of sepsis, and the medical doctors all said no. He was medically cleared. There was no sign of infection. 98 is a normal respiratory rate, because by the next day at 3 o'clock, I think he's down to like 83 or 82. His breathing has his oxygen level has decreased significantly. And so we have to talk about it. And I think it's significant that Christopher's parents will not watch the video. I think that's very, very significant, and we're going to get to it. There were some details about Christopher's past that I was not aware of. And so this is a crime fix segment. We're not going to watch the whole thing. I have the full link to the full video down in the description. Let's try to turn closed captions on. All right, so let's watch this part.
You'll learn that on May 1st of 2014, Corey was born to Brianna Michelow when she was just 17 years old. This defendant didn't come into Corey's life, and neither did the Gregors until Corey was 4 or 5.
Gregor's attorney, Mario Gallucci, explained how Chris Gregor found out that he was indeed a father.
In 2017, Christopher Gregor was studying for his master's degree at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. And he was also employed by Urban Teachers, which was a company that employed.
There's a great question. And I do not believe that it was Munchausen by proxy. So Brianna, the mother, took Corey in because he had some old bruises from the treadmill incident. And she had attempted to get emergency custody, and she was not granted emergency custody. And Corey was sent in with the discharge paperwork from the hospital shown with the recommendation for a CPS doctor's visit, because Christopher calls CPS himself to try to say that he believes that Brianna got their son to lie, because I think he was really scared about what Corey told the doctor. At this point, I don't think he was aware that there was a video that's played that showed exactly what happened that day on the treadmill. Okay. And so, oh, good gosh. So I think if you watch the treadmill video, and please, if you don't have to, don't. What you see him do to him, he did that in public. I worry about what he did in private. Okay, let's watch this.
Employed people to teach in urban areas. When he found out he was being sued for child support for a child he had never met, nor did he know he fathered. And that's where our story begins.
So at the time, Chris Gregor was working as a teacher in Baltimore. This information came from opening statements at the trial. Gregor grew up in Monroe Township, New Jersey. His dad, David Gregor, worked for New Jersey State Police. He's now retired. His mother, Carolyn, worked in real estate. The New York Post reported that Gregor was an all-star defensive lineman at Monroe Township High School and actually played for the school's state championship football team in 2009. Then in 2010, Gregor attended Wesleyan University in Connecticut and played for the school's football team, according to the 2010 roster that you can see right there. But a news story from 2010 shows that Gregor got into some trouble that fall in November. The Middletown Press reported that Gregor, appearing intoxicated, went into a woman's dorm room and took something and then punched 2 men who tried to help her. The website reported that Gregor told police that he went into the woman's dorm room by mistake, and when he realized his mistake, he tried to leave, but someone punched him in the face. Police didn't believe Gregor, and he was charged with third-degree assault and second-degree breach of peace. Gregor's LinkedIn page says he eventually got a degree in psychology from Ashford University and then a master's in secondary education.
My mic. I was not aware of the degree in psychology. And a bachelor's in psychology, it really doesn't give you it's like you just, depending on the university, you might learn about different diagnoses and everything, but you don't dig deep into treatment and all of that. I was not aware that he had a bachelor's in psychology and then a master's in teaching. And so let's keep going.
Education and teaching from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. The Post reported that Gregor was charged with half a dozen criminal charges in Baltimore from August 27th through 2018. Those charges included assault, robbery, and destruction of property. At that time, Gregor was working with urban teachers in Baltimore. You heard his lawyer mention that earlier. And that's when Gregor found out he was a father to a child he didn't even know existed. In the years before that, Gregor had worked in Tampa, Florida, as a coach and a sales associate for the Tampa Bay Lightning. That's a hockey team. He was also listed as a realtor and worked in real estate in New Jersey. That appears to be what he was doing at the time that he met Corey in 2019. Corey was actually born in 2014. His mom, Brianna, who you heard from earlier, testified at the trial.
So, Brianna, how old are you?
I'm 27,
And what is your birth date?
November 7th, 1996.
And where do you live?
East Brunswick,
And whom do you live with?
my boyfriend and daughter.
And do you work?
Yes,
And what is your occupation?
data entry,
Who is Corey Michelov?
my son,
And when did you give birth to Corey?
May 1st, 2014.
And how old were you when you gave birth to Corey?
17,
And what grade were you in when you gave birth to Corey?
11th grade.
And who is Corey's biological father?
The defendant,
So who is Corey's biological father?
the defendant,
And what's his name?
Christopher Gregor.
Okay. So I showed this part because I was not aware of his criminal history, and I don't think it's going to come into court. Courts really try to have like past bad acts that not influence the jury. So there have been there have been other trials that I've covered because even in the Harmony Montgomery trial, the jury was not aware of his detail. Like, I don't think his past assaults or his past, you know, weapons charges or any of those things. I don't think any of that came into the hearing because, and y'all, I'm not a lawyer. I like LawTube, and from what I've seen from other lawyers is they don't want things to be what they called prejudicial. They don't want those past actions to prejudice the jury. But if the defense tries to say he's this upstanding citizen, he would never hurt a fly, sometimes the prosecution can try to get some of those things in. But and I think during Brianna's testimony, she talked about another incident where before all of this, that Corey had a mark on his face. And I want to say black eye, but I think but it was some type of mark on his face. And Christopher tried to say that a toy or something. And anytime the explanation does not fit the um the injury, that's when I start getting a little suspicious about it. But all righty. And somebody mentioned earlier that they thought that and I think they're going to explain in here. So this hearing is outside of the presence of the jury. They're going to explain that they found some like cannabis paraphernalia or something in his car when he went to meet Brianna or something, and he lost custody for a period of time. But his parents to me are act because I know his parents have to know about his aggressive history. And somebody asked me about enabling, and I'll answer that question again later. But once again, I think it's very telling that Christopher's parents, they have not seen that treadmill video. Because how can you sit here and say something must have happened while he was with Brianna and you don't even know what your child is capable of? Like what he did to his own son. And that in public once again, which makes me concerned about what would he do in private. All right. So this is where the hearing starts.
When you run it, Barry Lucia on behalf of Mr. Gregor, Mr. Rodney is not with the, this morning, but Mr. Gregor is seated tonight.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Gregor. Defendant appears in court, appropriately attired in suit and tie, although today we do not have the jury present. Mr. Gallucci, we discussed yesterday, we wanted to at least utilize this day for certain hearings outside the presence of the jury. Would you put on the record what you intend to do today?
So, Judge, I have two witnesses today. They're Mr. Gregor's parents, David and Carolyn Gregor. They're going to discuss their testimony is basically to set up how Corey came into their life, where Mr. Gregor was at that time, when Mr. Gregor moved out, and then the events that took place between March 20th and April, I guess it would be 3rd. That's basically what they're going to call to testify.
Thank you. And the state wants to have this hearing because you're concerned about whether or not you receive the full proffer and what testimony may come out in front of the jury and whether it will be admissible or not.
Yes, Judge, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Gallucci, you can call your first witness.
We call David Gregor.
So, Sarah, Christopher's defense is that something happened while he was with Brianna, and that Brianna took him out of the hospital against medical advice, which the testimony has said the complete opposite. He was discharged, like he was not showing sign of infection. So the opening statement said, like, because in the defense opening statement, he said that Brianna took Corey out against medical advice, but the medical team all said no, he was not showing sign of infection. I believe the defense has an expert that's going to say Corey being tired and being nauseous, that those are all signs of sepsis, and that was the reason why he died. So Christopher ran. Like, his child is pronounced deceased, and he did not stay with the body. He got in his car and drove off and drove out of state. He starts Googling, and his Google searches have come into the trial. He starts Googling, can your phone be tracked in airplane mode? He tried to delete all of his messages with Brianna and with his mom. And he did a bunch of things that's just suspicious. Like, don't be suspicious, but he's over there being really, really suspicious. All of those things are very, very concerning, but we're going to listen to his dad talk first. I'm going to set it up just a little, like maybe 1.25. 1.25. Okay. If it's too fast, I'll slow it down.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Have a seat, please. Please state your full name and spell your last.
David Gregor, Gregor. Mr. Gallucci,
Thank you, Judge. How are you, Mr. Gregor?
hanging in there.
Okay. Are you married?
I am.
Okay. And what's your wife's?
Carolyn.
Do you have children?
Okay. So, okay, I missed this part. Sometimes when I'm watching these things, I'm doing other stuff. This is the first time, but this is somebody testifying like on his behalf. And so this is the first time that Chris has shown any like positive, like most of what he's shown has been like this menacing kind of look. And I don't know when's the last time he saw his dad, because he's currently incarcerated. I don't know how long he's been incarcerated, but I believe they deemed him to be a possible flight risk, and he is being held in jail. So,
Four.
Okay. And can you tell us who they are?
My oldest son is David. He's 35. The next in line is Kimberly. She's 32. Then it's Christopher. And then my son Daniel's 28.
Now, how old is Christopher?
Born in 92, so it's 31.
I know the birth dates. I have to do the math on the ages. It constantly changes.
So I'm going to direct you to August of 2017.
I'm going to slow it down a little bit.
In August of 2017, did you know of Rebecca or Brianna or Corey Mitchell?
I didn't at that time.
Okay. So when was the first time that you knew of them?
I received a call in late 2017, early 2018. I forget exactly what month it was. And it was from a lady that identified herself as Rebecca Micciola.
They probably do.
And after you received that phone call, do not tell me what she told you, but after you received that phone call, did you have conversations with your son?
I did.
Okay. And what did you discuss with your son?
We discussed the nature of the phone call, and that was that they believed Christopher was the father of a young boy.
Okay. And after you spoke to your son, what was the next time that anything dealing with Corey Vitrolo was done?
So Christopher was away, and he was coming back that weekend. My daughter at the time was still living with us. And so when she came home from work, I had a discussion with her about the nature of the phone call. She knew the name, but didn't know anything about Chris being a potential father of a young boy. Within a day or two, Kimberly produced a document that she was on social media and brought it down. I believe it was from Topics, which I'm not familiar with. But the gist of that was a conversation between people that strongly suggested that Christopher wasn't the father.
Okay. Now, you said that Christopher was coming home for the weekend. In August of 2017, where was Christopher living?
Christopher was living in Baltimore.
What was he doing? If you know, what was he doing?
Christopher was in the Johns Hopkins program for his master's degree in education with the urban teachers. So he was attending school, and at the same time, he was being mentored in the classroom to teach.
Now, did there come a time that you heard from this person who identified himself?
Objection, Judge, hearsay. That you heard from the person, like,
Well,
Did you receive a phone call?
yeah, I don't think he was going to answer the content of the
Okay.
conversation.
I
right?
wasn't.
Okay.
Did you receive a phone call from a person, again, who identified themselves as Rebecca Piccolo?
I did.
And how long in time was it between the first phone call you received from this person to the second time you received the call?
The second call was weeks later, because then subsequently there was a third call. But the second call was a few weeks later.
Now, after you received the second phone call from this person who identified herself as Rebecca Piccolo, did you have another conversation with your son?
I did at some point.
And Rebecca, it's my understanding, is Rebecca. Yes, that is Brianna's mother.
The second conversation was very short with Rebecca.
Did there come a time when now Corey Miccolo became part of the Gregor family?
There did.
Okay, and do you recall when that was?
Corey's first visit was in the beginning of August of 2019. It was just a visit for a couple hours. I remember it because Christopher went to pick him up. And it was a big day for us. It was my only grandson. He came for a couple-hour visit, and the preparation of everything at the house was about Corey. I remember going through I had 4 children, they all played sports, so I was going through all the old equipment now that the children were older and pulling out all kinds of balls and baseballs and footballs. And
So the father is the individual, I believe it's David Gregor. He is a retired police officer or retired law enforcement. I don't know exactly what type. So he is retired law enforcement. And there's a part of me that wonders if a part of him is feeling embarrassed having to be here. I'm sure he never thought because I think if he thought Chris would do what he did, I don't think he would have like I think they would have wanted their grandchild to be safe. But they are going to try to blame Brianna, but let's watch this. There's just a part of me that wonders if he knows.
So,
And that's why they don't watch that treadmill video. And the treadmill incident is not what caused Corey not being here anymore. But I wonder if something happened inside of that apartment. That because the only people that know is the only one that's left is Christopher. And I don't think he's going to say what happened. The state tried to offer him a plea deal of him doing 30 years, but that he'd have to do all 30. And I think the state appropriately wanted to come down pretty hard on him because I think they have a pretty solid case because he's facing life in prison, like 30 years to life in prison based on the charges that he has.
so you met him at that time.
No, no.
You testified that he was your only grandchild at that time.
Yes,
So at that time, your children were all older.
they were.
So now, did there come a time when, besides a visit, that Corey became, it became more than just visitation? And by the way, where did you live at this time?
We lived in Monroe.
And that's here in New Jersey.
It is, Middlesex County.
So did there come a time where it became more than just he came over for a visit?
August 28th was the next visit that I remember, and I believe that was ordered through the court. And at that time, it was close to him beginning overnight visits. So we actually had set up a bedroom for him and did everything we could to prepare for him to arrive. But there was so much more than just the tangible things to get ready because there became some serious discussion in terms of what we needed to do to prepare for him based on the dialogue that I had with his grandmother.
Now, when you say, without telling us what that dialogue was, what are some of the things that you did to prepare for Corey now moving in or having more contact with him? Overnight visits, what were some of the things that you needed to do?
Well, school hadn't started yet, so it was everything in terms of making his life comfortable. It was what size clothes did he wear, what food did he like, what were his hobbies, setting his room up so he was comfortable because he really didn't know us very well. So it was everything to make him comfortable to live with us, all his likes, and it was during his visits, trying to get that information from him without sitting down and browbeating him in terms of everything he liked, everything he didn't like. It was just spending the time with him and getting a feel for what we could do best for him when he arrived.
Okay. So now this is just overnight visitation at this point.
In the end of August, yes.
So did there come a time from August 28th of 2019 that overnight visit became greater than just overnight visit?
It did.
And what was that?
I believe it was October.
Okay, and what happened in October that changed?
In October, Christopher had filed for custody, the way I remember it, and he became the custodial parent. And so with that, Corey began to live with us. And I say live with us, it was for a certain time period. It was Mondays through Thursdays. Then he would go back to his grandmother's house on Fridays after school and then come back to us off the school bus on Monday. There's times where that was changed based on holidays, based on vacation. So it seemed, when I say changed often, it wasn't steadfast. It did change. But in our minds, he was living with us and he would visit with his grandmother.
Okay. So when he was living with you, were you working?
I was. I'm self-employed. I set my own schedule. And part of our plan to accept Corey into our home was that I could do such where I could make my schedule, because Chris was teaching at the time. So
When you say Chris, you're talking about your son.
Christopher was teaching at the time in Camden. And we knew that in order to take him, besides the challenges we had in front of us, to make him most comfortable and to assist in his learning, I thought it best if I could be there almost during all his waking hours. Didn't always happen that way, but for the most part, it involved getting up very early with him. My wife was reporting to the office at the time with her job, and my wife would make him breakfast. If Christopher was still home, which was a rarity during the first 3 months because he was leaving at 6 a.m. So Corey went up, he either took a shower the night before, or he took a shower that morning, and it was me that monitored him and helped him get dressed. And when he came down for breakfast, I mean, it was a total commitment. He'd come down for breakfast, I'd go through his book bag, and we'd make sure all his assignments were there, his lunch was ready, anything for school that he needed. And as soon as he got off the school bus, which dropped him off right in front of our house at about 3 o'clock, I was there to meet him off the school bus.
So you went from grandpa to almost father.
We often jokingly said that, we just had our fifth child, and it wasn't for.
And I wonder if that's why Christopher wanted his own apartment. Like, I wonder if he didn't like the role his parents were playing in his child's life. Like, that's and it sounds like, so he was 27, 28. So Christopher was 27, 28 at the time, and he does not sound like he was emotionally mature. It doesn't sound like he was stable to me, in my opinion. So at that time, I think he was a realtor. And people are asking, with his criminal history, how could he be working at a school? And sometimes you're able to have some, like, I don't, normally they do a fingerprint background check. So I know in my area, before you go into the school, you have to clear you have to, they do an extensive background check, and they have said no, like, to some people, if people have certain things in their background, they are not allowed to come into the school. Some school districts aren't great about that, I'll be honest. And so I don't know if this, whatever school district he was in, because I think at one point he was teaching in Baltimore, and I, I love Maryland. Y'all know I'm a Virginia psychologist. Sometimes in Maryland, I've seen people get away with stuff. I don't know. Like I've sometimes seen people get the job, and then sometimes they're fired once the background check comes back. In when a school district that I used to work in, so I used to run a school-based counseling agency, and before my staff could step foot in the school did their own background check. They didn't trust the background check we did for the agency. They wanted to see the background check themselves, and staff could not start until the background check was back. Because I had one staff person that has a very generic name, and somebody did a crime that has her same name, and so it took like 6 weeks, because if the background check didn't clear in like a few days, if they had to send it to the state office to verify, yes, this isn't the same person, it always took so much longer. And so most school districts require some type of background check. In my opinion, he comes off as incredibly insecure, because who tells that child that they're, so I don't think he was making him run because of his body. I think he was mad at the mom, because the mom dropped him off late that day, because she ran into traffic. Like, she was doing her own thing, and she dropped him off kind of late, and he sent these like these messages back to her of you're going to have to subtract the time you're late from your next pickup. And he was so controlling, so controlling. And kids need discipline and support. They can't, you can't crush them. And to me, in my opinion, Christopher was crushing. Uh, and Grandpa, to me, everything they're doing seems to be in support of of Christopher, and of Corey. And I think they were trying to do what was best for Corey. But I think that's why Christopher wanted out of the house. Those are just my personal opinions, my personal thoughts.
Or a lack of commitment from Chris, but it was our game plan as a family to do the best that we could for him.
Now, when you first were introduced to Corey, did he live somewhere other than Monroe?
He did.
Do you know where he lived?
He lived in Jamesburg.
Okay, do you know if he went to school there?
He did.
Okay, now when Chris became the custodial parent, did you change the school system?
Changed the school within the first few months, yes.
Okay, and where did he now go to school?
He went to Monroe schools and he went to Barclay Brooks.
Y'all, like, yes. So the day of the treadmill incident, he had her drop. So the day of the treadmill incident, he had Brianna drop Corey off at the gym. And that's what he did to his own flesh and blood. So it was that day. It was the day. And his parents. So they're going to talk about seeing the bruise on his face and Corey talking about falling on the treadmill, but nobody, because if I was working with a client, so when clients come in with unexplained marks or bruises, I always ask them what happened. And if a child had said that they fell on the treadmill, I would be like, "Oh, so what happened?" And it was like, "Oh, it was going too fast and I fell." Because he was 6, he was 7, like he was just a little, he was 6 years old. I don't think he could have explained it the way it actually happened. Like, because as an adult, I have trouble wrapping my brain. Christopher bit the back of his head. Like, what the like I can't. I can't. I just can't. Okay, we're gonna keep going.
Okay, so had your children went through that school system?
They all did.
Okay, and were you familiar with the school system?
Very.
Okay. And what did you do as a grandparent or father with respect to that, his education?
Well, part of the,
Briefly.
I was totally involved in his education. Monroe has a system by which you can go online, and much to my other children's chagrin during their careers in the school, I was on there every day. And I was on there checking for assignments, checking for grades, checking for, in general, how he was doing. He had some classes that were more of a challenge and blocks of instruction than others. The teacher, in fact, would make notes and put it in his book bag every night about how he did that particular day. And I know that's one of the first things I did when I got him off the school bus. I brought him in and let him unwind. And I'd open that up because it was, did Corey have a good day or did Corey have a bad day? And it seemed in Monroe that most of them were good days. There was an occasional bad day. And a bad day usually was defined by focus issues, being disruptive, things like that, that had manifested itself in a larger degree when he was still in Jamesburg from all the things that I had read. So I was totally involved with his education, from not just perusing online in terms of how he was doing in school, but going through his book bag, doing lessons with him. I tried to do as much as I could before Christopher came home because he was doing the same thing after dinner with him.
So now let me bring you to January of 2020. Prior to January of 2020, did Christopher and Brianna Michelot basically share custody?
They did. It was called shared custody.
Okay. In January of 2020, did the custody change?
It did.
Okay. And what changed about the custody?
Christopher, I believe it was on January 28th, was given full custody.
And when Christopher received full custody, where did Corey live then?
With us.
Okay. So you were still living in Monroe.
Yes.
And up until the time Corey died, if you know, did Brianna Mitchell ever regain custody?
No.
So between January,
He just stays mad. Like he just stays looking like he needs to poop. Like that's just like he just stays. Like that's just his face. Like his face just stays like that. Sometimes it gets more menacing than it is right now. Like this is like it just stays like this.
and of 2020 and March of 2021, how long was Corey in Monroe?
Y'all know I like interrupting. Y'all are here for the interruptions. So the treadmill was in the apartment gym. So it was a public place. It was in the apartment gym.
They moved to Barnegat in, I think the date was August 28th of 2020.
Now, between January,
So to me, his father comes off like he wanted like an appropriate level of control. I think Chris wanted like absolute control in kind of a sadistic way. He seemed to like, in my opinion, this is my opinion, Chris seemed to take advantage of people that were vulnerable because who needs to exert control over a 6-year-old? Like I'm bigger, I'm stronger. I don't need to prove it. Like even in the video, Dr. G explains talked about like Christopher is taking up as much space as possible. He just uh and I did watch the other doctor um, is it the other Dr. G? He called him a man baby. Like the other Dr. G. He's the one that has like almost 2 million subs.
of 2020 and August of 2020, did Brianna have visitation?
There were periods she had visitation.
When you say there were periods, what do you mean?
She had lost the ability for visitation in the beginning. I believe it was the end of January 2020.
Okay. And do you know when she regained
Grande.
visitation?
Yeah, that's who it was.
I don't remember that off the top of my head.
Was it prior to Chris moving to Barnegat?
Yes.
So let's get to Chris.
So there are 2 Dr. Gs. So just regular Dr. G that analyzes body language, and then there's Dr. Grande. And so the man baby was Dr. Grande. Dr. G explains took a look at the behavior. I wanted to see what other psychologists, what other people had to say on this case.
Moving to Barnegat. When was that?
August 28th, 2020.
And do you recall why he moved to Barnegat?
I do.
When was that?
Well, Chris was concerned that as grandparents that we were assuming a burden, if you will, of the load of raising Corey. And we obviously were quite ecstatic with being able to help out. And Chris shared with us the need to be able to raise him by himself. And at the same time, trying to find.
I think it was all about control. I think he wanted a level of control and those watching eyes. I think he wanted control. That's
Find
my
a school
thought.
system that would be good enough for him. We had many a discussion when he chose to leave because not only did we not want Corey, having just known him for a short amount of time, to leave, but we felt as if Chris down in Barnegat was going to be unprotected.
Mm.
So now, from the moment you met Corey until the moment Christopher moved to Barnegat, did you ever see Christopher mistreat, abuse, or hit Corey?
Never.
Because there's no way he would do that in front of his parents. Like, he, to me, is that two-faced. The word that comes to my mind is monster. Like, he's the Jekyll and Hyde. Like, he's the, oh, I'm this caring, loving person, but if you cross, like, he has this switch that I think can flip. These are just my personal thoughts. And that's why I think the parents won't watch that video. And I wish the prosecution could play it for them. If I was the prosecution, I would try to play it for them. Like, I'm sorry, there's no way y'all are going to get up here and say all this and you have not seen what this jury has had to watch. But I also think that them not watching it speaks volumes, because how can you get up here and say all these things and you haven't even watched this publicly available video?
Have you watched the treadmill video?
No,
Okay, why not?
because I don't want to see. I don't want that to be my remembrance of Corey, that he was.
And he's saying he doesn't want it to be the thing he remembers of Corey, but I don't think he wants to see Christopher do that either. Like, I think he knows the monster came out in that video. That's my thought, my personal thought. I don't know what's going on through in his mind. I have to keep saying that, but
Mistreated in that single instance on the treadmill.
Now, between March 20th and April 2nd, 2021, did you have any conversations with Christopher?
We did.
Okay, what did you discuss?
Well, we actually,
Objection, Judge, it's hearsay.
So what exactly are we doing here today? We're doing.
and I think the fact that Brianna saw that video, I'd go throw something at somebody. If you did that, if somebody did that to my child, I don't know that I could keep it together. I can't tell you exactly what I would do if I saw. And I don't know that she had seen what happened. I think at this point she just knew that, like, something was going on. The judge can be hit or miss with me, like, but on this fact, the judge does not believe that Brianna or her mom, that they were, like, threatening to harm them. Like, they just wanted to know what happened to Corey, and they were, um, the judge's statements at the end, I appreciated that.
A 104 hearing on whether any of this testimony is admissible.
Right.
How was any of it admissible?
Background.
But how was, coming across like a loving grandfather who's obviously cares deeply for the child, but how are those things even going to come in front of the jury?
Well, it's a background to some extent of how this child came into their life. I think.
Well, yeah, the timetable is one thing, that's fine. It already came out I believe, to the jury. The defendant wasn't aware when the child was born and things like that, but, I have a lot of concerns. Chris moving down to Barnegat would be, quote, unprotected. That's all opinion testimony, that's conspiracy theory testimony, so the rules of evidence don't really apply at a 104A hearing, because this is not a hearing on the admissibility of defendant statements.
And, like, Christopher wasn't the one that needed protection. I think Corey would probably still be alive if they had stayed, because he would have had, or I don't know if he would taken him somewhere. I don't know. Like, this whole thing is just very, very messed up. Very, very messed up. Like, ugh.
So you can ask things that involve some hearsay, but you need to have some parameters because we can't be doing this in front of the jury. What about the issue of this defendant testifying that his hearsay knowledge of custody orders? Don't we use the order? Because he just testified that the mother did not regain custody. there's an exhibit that she regained joint legal custody on October 28th, 2020. So I'm not going to allow hearsay testimony, particularly incorrect hearsay testimony. We have an exhibit that says something else. So you need to give me a focus of what you're intending to accomplish here.
Now I'm intending to accomplish the events between March 20th and April 2nd, and April 3rd, actually,
All right, well, why 2020 though?
21.
Okay, all right, well, that's obviously a relevant time period.
And that's what I was just asking.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
So between March 20, 2021 and April 3rd of 2021, did you have conversations with your son?
We did.
Did you discuss Corey?
We actually went down to see them
Okay.
on March 22nd.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify something. So the jury is not present. This is a hearing that's happening outside of the presence of the jury to determine if any of this can come. And the judge is not going to allow the Corey's grandfather to make the statement about like Christopher not being protected. And because both the grandfather and the grandmother are going to try to make statements about like feeling through that Christopher was feeling threatened, like that's why he wouldn't come back. Like they're going to try to explain his behavior, and I don't think the judge is going to let that stuff in at all. Okay? And we talk a lot about blind obedience. And to me, Christopher, his demeanor reminded me of like children of Marines that I've worked with. And it reminded me of like the Timothy Ferreter case. And I think he was likely raised and possibly, so I don't know, I'm just guessing. I think it was probably a very strict household, and we'll never know. uh, We'll never know whether um Christopher was ever harmed like as a child. We won't know if Christopher had a history of childhood harm. Yes. It sounds like the grandparents, it sounds like they were doing, I don't know, good enough. I don't know. But with this case and this situation, on his own, it sounds like Christopher took it to a whole other level, and he kept things secret. He made sure, because y'all are going to hear in a second, when Corey tells, because the grandparents are going to ask the child what happened, and the child is going to say, I fell on the treadmill, and they're not going to go to their child and be like, what happened? You know, like they're not going to dig any deeper. Like the child says he fell on a treadmill, and they're like, oh, okay, and they never saw the other marks on his body. And so blind obedience, that's the do it because I told you to, don't ask questions. That type being raised like that opens kids up to be harmed and not know to tell people who are safe. And I covered the doctor, the pediatrician that testified. She broke down, like she was just because I don't know that she's ever lost a patient in this way, especially to have a child die like the next day. She saw him on April 1st, and they were trying to get CPS involved. Some people are going to say, like, why would she take him back? Like Brianna had to, because she could have been arrested. She could have lost even her supervised, no, she had unsupervised visitation. She could have lost her visitation if she didn't take him back. She had to take him back. Her custody time had ended, and they did play the audio of Christopher calling CPS, and yeah.
And on March 22nd, where did you go see him?
Well, my wife had set up a viewing at two homes that we were discussing with Chris purchasing down in the Barnegat Bayville area.
So you went down to visit.
We did.
Okay, and what, if anything, did you, Corey, Christopher, and your wife do?
Well, we spent about 3 or 4 hours down in total. We visited two homes, walked through the homes. with Corey, discussing, setting up bedroom. What, would the house be able to accommodate everything that they wanted to do for Corey? Was there a bedroom for him? We looked at 2 homes. We had discussions with Chris about the pros and cons, discussing, setting up bedroom. What, would the house be able to accommodate everything that they wanted to do for Corey? Was there a bedroom for him? We looked at 2 homes. We had discussions with Chris about the pros and cons of all the houses. And then subsequent to that, we went down to my brother-in-law's house in Barnegat.
And who's your brother?
Michael Anderson.
Were you, Corey, Chris, and your brother-in-law's family all together?
We were.
And what, if anything, did you guys do together?
Well, we spent, I think it was about an hour in the house talking.
I wanted to comment, y'all know we're here for the interruptions. So to me, he seemed to see his child as like a burden. Like to me, Christopher doesn't come off as a loving parent to me. Now, he hasn't had an opportunity to, if he does get on the stand, but even like while everyone's talking, he gets emotional at certain times, but all of his behaviors to me were self-protection. Because he also Googled, uh, can red bruises turn into, like, he was Googling weird stuff. He Googled like how long, I don't know, like he was Googling weird stuff. And I'm confusing because I also watched the Daybell trial and I'm confusing some of their text messages. And so that's why I'm not going into those specifics. But look, his Google history is really suspicious. Very, very suspicious. And so and somebody mentioned that Christopher seemed immature. And to me, a person who's immature doesn't need more rules, they need skills. To me, Christopher lacks emotion regulation skills. He lacks emotional intelligence. He lacks, like, there are things that he lacks. And I don't think that, like, more control fixes things. Like, often that makes things worse. And so those are my thoughts. Let's keep going.
About mainly Chris and Corey and what we were trying to accomplish down there. And my brother-in-law already lived down there, and he has some opinion about the area, and as well as we did, because we were very familiar with it.
Okay. Now, did there come a time when you saw any bruising on Corey on that day?
We did.
Okay. Where did you see the bruising?
I saw a bruise on his forehead.
Okay. And did you or your wife speak to Corey about the bruise?
We did.
Okay. Was it you that spoke to him or your wife?
Both.
Okay. What, if anything, did you
I
say to Corey?
what happened? And Corey said, I fell on a treadmill.
Now, between March 20th and April 2nd, did you have any contact with Brianna Micholo or Rebecca Micholo between those dates?
No.
So I'm going to skip ahead. He's going to talk about how he thought, like, his thoughts and feelings about Rebecca and the mom. So I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. Let's keep
Because
going.
he was at the hospital at the time during a couple of the conversations. And I said, I'm getting there as fast as I can. I don't go.
Did there come
Okay, I'm gonna rewind just a little bit because this is the part where he finds out that his grandchild is deceased after Christopher took him to the hospital.
Of my son?
So when you say a wanted for murder poster, what was the poster of?
There was a poster of Chris with wanted for murder.
Okay. Was it a picture of him?
It was.
And can you describe for us what that picture looked like?
The picture had the one that I saw had a jail bar superimposed in front of his face.
And where were these pictures located?
They were located on social media.
Okay. Were they located anywhere in your neighborhood?
There came a time where there was various postings put up in our neighborhood, on our neighbors' vehicles and on the street lamps and poles surrounding my house.
Now, prior to that, when you spoke to Danny, that's when these events were beginning to happen.
That was the beginning.
Okay. And did you convey that to Chris?
I did.
And by the way, do you know where Chris was at that moment?
I don't know exactly where he was.
Okay. Did you tell him to come home?
I did.
Okay.
I started.
So for anyone that's kind of newer to this case, what happened was Corey, they're about to give him a CT, he starts to seize, and they start needing to do emergency life-saving things. And there's video of Christopher at the hospital. There's the video of him walking out the hospital, getting in his car, and driving off. And he drove to Arkansas. He was detained in Tennessee a few days later. So he went to the airport to pick up his girlfriend, I don't know, or a girl, I don't know. He went there to pick up a female and a woman. And so, uh, and then the parents are going to try to say like, oh, he was coming home, but the whole don't go. That is because they were concerned he was going to flee after like. And the father called the police because he was concerned about Christopher. It's a whole thing.
Started with don't leave, because he was at the hospital at the time during a couple of the conversations. And I said, I'm getting there as fast as I can. I don't go.
Did there come a time that he was gone and you had a conversation with him and he was coming back?
Yes.
And what was that?
I want to say it was the next day was the next conversation. In terms of his commitment to come back, I don't know if it was the next day or the next night or morning, but there was a time where he made the conscious decision to return.
Okay, and that was when, April 3rd? If you remember.
It was either Saturday afternoon or Saturday night. There were many calls back and forth.
And were you involved in trying to make the arrangements for him to come back?
I was.
And what did you do for that?
Well, I mean, initially was no more than encouraging to come back. He had his vehicle, he had the means to get back. And then subsequent to that,
But he's over here Googling like, can your car be tracked in airplane mode and all this other stuff. I want to get to the cross. I want to get to the cross. So let's try to start from here.
Was happening between the custody issues in family court.
to the degree that DCP&P shared and that Chris kept a file on all the court orders. And so I was familiar with what they all said. What I wasn't familiar with was DCP&P reports, with the exception of one that they happened to leave at the house when we called them and interviewed us.
Okay, so are you aware then that in October 28th of 2020, that there was custody granted between your son and Brianna?
I'm aware that the language that was shared with me in terms of custody, because I asked this question of the workers when they came, when Corey was.
Well, I'm not asking you about the language that was shared. I'm asking you, were you aware specifically of that order?
I'm not sure which order it is.
Okay, the order that I just said, the October 28th of 2020 order where custody was granted between the defendant and Brianna, were you aware of the order?
I was aware of a shared custody order, but I don't remember the date.
Okay, so at that point in time then, as you just said, then there was a shared custody order between the defendant and Brianna, correct?
That's the language that was used, yes.
Okay, so previous to that then, the custody arrangement had been going between your son and Corey's grandmother, correct?
Correct.
And during this time period, Brianna was actually never had custody of Corey, correct? It was between the grandmother and the defendant.
All the court documents that I saw was Rebecca Michelli versus Brianna and Christopher Gregor.
That's correct. Thank you. So during the time period when all this was going on, there was a period of time that your son actually had lost custody of Corey as well, correct?
There was.
Oh. So Corey came to live with you when he was.
So the only thing that Brianna ever did, so Brianna there was never anything physical. It was allegations of neglect due to substances. And she is now sober, but she did struggle, and she did talk about that during her testimony. She did struggle with her sobriety, and she was living with her parents at the time, and so at the time of this whole incident, she only had weekend visits. That was what she was allowed. And yeah, I didn't know that she had a daughter. I truly wish people in these situations the best. And so, yeah.
Was in kindergarten school year, correct?
If that corresponds with his age at the time, I don't remember if it was kindergarten or first.
Well, you just testified before that you were so involved in his education, correct?
I was.
So if you were so involved in his education, yet you didn't know what school year he was in?
What I knew was his curriculum, his assignments, and his evaluations.
He does not like being questioned. He does not like being questioned or we're going to keep watching.
So there was a time period then which you were so involved in his education, yet you didn't know what grade he was in, that Corey came to live with you, correct?
Correct.
And during that time frame, Corey was also visiting with his grandmother, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, it's actually not custody, but your son had residency over Corey, correct?
I think the term that was shared with me by DCP&P is he was the custodial parent.
Okay. So in, I believe it's August, right, of 2020, then Corey and your son moved to Barnegat, correct?
Correct.
And when they moved to Barnegat, they at that time had left living in your home in Monroe, correct?
Correct.
And at that point in time, the defendant and Corey, you were no longer so involved in Corey's care, correct?
I was involved to every degree I could be living in Monroe while they were living in Barnegat.
Oh. And while the defendant and Corey were in Barnegat living, you weren't having daily contact with the two of them, correct?
Between my wife and I, it was pretty close.
You weren't going to see them every single day traveling from Monroe to Barnegat, correct?
We didn't see him every day, no.
Okay, and obviously you were not present during all the times that the defendant and his son were together in the apartment in Barnegat, correct?
No, I wasn't there all the time.
Okay. So
And to me, he seems so mad that he seems to be shaking a little. That's what I see.
night of April 1st, right, of 2021, you weren't in Barnegat that evening, correct?
No.
And you weren't with the defendant and Corey that evening, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't go to Jersey Shore Hospital, correct?
Correct.
And you didn't go to the pediatrician, correct?
Correct.
And you did not visit your son later that evening or see Corey that evening after Corey returned that morning, correct?
Correct.
So anything that was going on April 1st of 2021, you learned that from your son, correct?
I also learned it from my wife.
Right, so you have no firsthand knowledge of any of the events that transpired on April 1st of 2021, correct?
I wasn't there.
So calling your attention now to the day that Corey passed, you had spoken to your son while he was at the hospital, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And your son had spoken to your wife on the telephone at approximately 4:54, correct?
Spoke numerous times.
Okay. And based upon this conversation, you and your
We've already talked about the fact I am a snitch. Do you know? So if my kid did it, does that make sense? Because so my grandchild, I would want to speak for my grandchild. Does that make sense? Like there's no way I would like I've told y'all don't my family members don't do something and think that I'm not gonna say something. Like I am for justice and truth and I am for you getting the consequences of your actions. Like, no, no. And there's no way I would have to have all of the information. If I'm gonna put my ass on the line and get up there and testify for you, I would have to see that video before. And if I saw that video, hell to the gnaw. I'm not saying a thing for you. Like I'm not. There's no way I'm going to get up and say anything for you after I see that video. I just turned state's witness. Like this child looked fearful when I asked them questions. Like I would be rethinking everything. No. There's no way. Okay? So, um I think parents that enable their children's behavior, yes, they would be supportive of this. I have healthy boundaries, and if my child does something, I love him, I support him. I would pay for him to have not pay. Wait a minute, you did this. You're getting a public defender. You're getting the lawyer you can afford. Like no, but uh, and if I did pay for a lawyer or something, you're gonna have to pay me back. Like I don't know. Like to me, there's a difference between support and enabling. And enabling is me trying to protect you from the consequences of your actions. And I am all for like you getting the consequences of your actions because you did this to this helpless 6-year-old boy. I can't get over that. I can't unsee what I saw. I can't.
wife then began to travel down to the hospital, correct?
We did.
And Corey was pronounced at approximately 5:03 p.m. that day.
Okay.
So are you aware that he was
Question?
pronounced?
I don't know the time of pronouncement.
Okay.
No.
So you're not sure about that? Okay. So you actually called the Stafford Township Police Department at about what time?
I don't recall the time.
Okay, but you were on your way down to the hospital when you called, right?
It was.
And when you called while you were on your way down to the hospital, you called this in as a unintended death?
I didn't use that terminology.
Didn't you tell Detective Mitchell in a statement that you gave to him that you called it in because it was an unattended death?
Again,
In my opinion, I think the family might be trying to protect like the Gregor name. They might be trying to protect their own, in my opinion. Like this is just, I don't know. But in my opinion, I could see a family like this not liking their name being out here like this. Those are just my thoughts. I don't know that he was the golden child, maybe in high school, but like then he like life seemed to fall apart for him once he left dad's house. But I think and when you have a very authoritarian controlling household, once a person gets a little bit of freedom, sometimes they go way too far. And so yeah.
again, I'm not sure where that.
Mom seems smothering to me. In my opinion, the mom seems a little smothering. We'll get to her in a second. We'll get to her in a second. I might have to skip ahead in just a little bit because I'm have to, yeah, I might have to skip ahead. We'll see.
That terminology is coming from.
Well, didn't you say that you were aware of the terminology because of your experience in law enforcement?
I don't believe I used unattended death. What I described to the detective was that, well, I described what was relayed to me from Christopher, and that Christopher was at the hospital when Corey passed. I'm not sure the words, I know what an unintended death is, but I don't know that I ever used those words.
Okay. So
You
you,
saying unintended or on?
unintended,
Unintended, not on, I didn't know you said on.
unattended,
Hey.
A, unattended, yeah.
We know the child died in the hospital, so
Yeah,
you're just cross-examining whether you use that term.
Yes,
Yeah, good.
exactly. Thank you, Judge. So when you,
Okay, so I'm gonna have to skip ahead to mom. So they go back and forth. They have a sidebar. Ooh, I want to see the judge ask him some questions. The judge has some questions for him.
April 2nd, correct?
yes,
And that's a Friday, to your recollection?
I believe it was.
Is it refresh your recollection that made it Good Friday?
It was Good Friday. He was off from school. Yes.
And that's, in this case, there's been testimony, that, in fact, that's why the DCP&P office wasn't open, because it was a legal holiday, that Friday. So you go to Southern Ocean County Medical Center, your son is no longer there. You've since learned, obviously, that he left the state and was stopped in Tennessee, right?
Yes.
You testified to Mr. Gallucci that at some point you're telling him to come back.
The entire time.
All right. And you said, I believe at one point, that by Saturday night he was going to come back. So Saturday night would be April 3rd, right?
Yes.
What do you know on your personal knowledge is happening at your residence in Monroe between the time you find out Corey's passed until Saturday night? What do you see or observe at your own residence?
Well, physically at my residence, or because what was going on is a lot of folks were sharing me information.
I get that, I understand that, but the problem with that being admissible is somebody telling you something is hearsay then, and Mr. Gallucci can call that other person to say it. But so
Well-
Danny's telling you stuff that Rebecca shows up, right?
Danny's telling me stuff that there were a couple phone calls. Rebecca comes.
But you're not there when Rebecca's there,
I'm not.
and you're not receiving those phone calls.
Well, there were calls to my cell phone, but I don't recall the exact time of those because they never stopped.
And I understand that. And then any vandalism to your house between the night of April 2nd to the, say, midnight, April 3rd.
No. What was being shared with me, however, was a lot, and hard copies being sent, they were sending them electronically, our friends, of what was out there being posted all over social media.
Which was what?
Chris was wanted for murder.
Not yet.
Arguably true though, right?
Oh, I didn't know.
I mean, he was ultimately charged with murder, so you know that statement that he was.
Not that night
No,
or
of
the
course
next
not.
day, but that's what was being developed, and that was circulating through social media. And those are the posters that I saw online with him behind bars.
In response to that, you're telling him he should come back to New Jersey.
I still told him to come back. I said, you need to know this is out there, but you need to come back
And when he came back, where did he go?
to our house.
Thank you. Any further questions in light of my question? Yes, Judge.
It doesn't. So they're gonna, and I don't think the judge made a decision on whether any of this can come in. So now Christopher's mother is going to testify. All of this testimony, welcome. If you are new here, I am Dr. Berry. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I'm just sharing general thoughts based on what I see. I can't diagnose. Christopher is innocent until proven guilty. I'm aware of bias, and after seeing that treadmill video, if I was on the jury, it to me, from the evidence, and the prosecution is presenting their case right now, I will listen to what the defense has to say and to the defense experts. and we'll see what happens, but this is a hard one. Let's go.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So have a seat, please, and state your full name and spell the last name. Carolyn Gregor, Gregor.
Mr. Galucci.
Just again. Good morning, Ms. Gregor.
Hi.
Are you the mother of Christopher Gregor?
I am.
Did there come a time in your life where you knew you had a grandson?
Yes.
Okay, and what was that?
2019.
And this is once again, he looks soft when he sees his parents. This is the only time that he looks soft, and then his face hardens again. It's a whole thing. The natural state of his face is just very, and he's on trial for unaliving his son. The other charge he's also charged with is child harm based on the treadmill video. And I don't think there's any way he gets out of that charge. And we'll see what the jury decides with this one. There was something else I wanted to say when I paused. I had a good point, and he's definitely a mama's boy, and he's gonna stay a lot softer, I think, during his mother's testimony than he did with his dad. But Brianna, the mother of Corey, talked about how Christopher said that Corey was too emotional, and she also said that Christopher said that Corey was like, it was almost like he wanted him to, like, man, it's like so toxic. He's 6, and that's what she told him. She's like, he's 6 years old. But the doctor described his demeanor in her office as like he was just extremely still and just very, it wasn't kind of playful like you would see with with a typical 6-year-old.
And that's Corey. Mitchell.
Corey, yes.
And when you learned of this, did there come a point in your life where Corey Mitchell moved into your home?
Yes.
And that was in Monroe?
Yes.
And did there come a time when Corey moved out of your home?
Yes.
And when was that?
August of 2019, 2020.
Now, let me direct your attention to the time frame between March 20th, 2021 and April 3rd of 2021. Between March 20th of 2021 and April 3rd of 2021, did you see your grandson?
Yes.
When was that?
March 22nd.
Okay. And can you tell us about that?
Yes. Chris was interested in purchasing a home. So we had, I'm a real estate agent, as Chris was, and we found 2 homes in the Barnegat area, Bayville, that area. And we went, myself, Chris, Corey, and my husband, we went to go see the homes. And then afterward, we went to visit my brother for a little bit. He lives in Barnegat. And then we went out for dinner.
Where'd you go to dinner?
I think it's called the Sunset Marina. It's in Barnegat.
Okay. Now, during the day, at any point, did you notice any bruises, contusions, abrasions?
So Sarah, they were just looking at homes. They didn't buy him a home because Christopher was living in an apartment. Thank goodness he was in that apartment complex. Christopher was interested. Oh, y'all all heard that. Y'all thought that he wanted them to buy him a home. Oh, I don't know.
To Corey.
Yes.
Okay. What did you observe?
He had a bruise on his forehead.
Did you ask him about it?
Yes.
What did you say?
Where did the bruise come from, Corey?
And what happened?
And he told me he fell on the treadmill.
Now, you were with him the whole day on March 22nd? From
It-
what time to what time?
Approximately 4 o'clock till about 7:30.
Okay. And during that time from 4 o'clock to 7:30, what was Corey's demeanor?
He was fine. He was energetic. He actually got me scared at one of the houses because it was a little close to a main road. and we were outside and he was excited and running around, and I was like worried because there were cars and trying to keep him contained while Dave and Chris looked at the house. He was just his normal fun self.
Okay. What was Christopher's demeanor?
He was fine. He was, looking at the house. He really wanted to find a house for him and Corey and their dog Peyton. And he wanted to be in a good school district. So he was excited to try to find something. So, he was very interested in looking at the house and whatnot.
Now, between March 22nd now and April 3rd, did you see Corey?
So my kiddo likes to run, and I would because the speed, I think Christopher was mad that Corey was able to run because it was a very high speed. It looked like, I don't know what the speed was. It looked like it might have been like 4.0, because when the video starts, like he is running very, very fast for a long period of time. And then, in my opinion, it looks like Christopher then speeds it up, and then like he's trying but it was to a point where with his little leg, like he could not keep up at that pace. And I think without putting his hands on him, like he just because well, and then he did put his hands on him and try to keep him on the treadmill. It's a horrific video. If you can avoid it, do it. But like that whole incident, to me, that showed just like that sadism, that control. And this all happened after his mother dropped him off late. And in my opinion, he was mad at mom. And because of that lack of emotional maturity, he took it out on his son, which is not appropriate. Um, Corey was innocent. He was the one that was stuck in the middle, and he just wanted to be loved by his dad. And mm, I I don't know how you could do that to anything, to anyone. And he did that to his son.
I did not.
Did you see the treadmill video from March 20th?
I have not.
So on April 2nd of 2020,
I wish he had asked her why. I wish he had asked her why she didn't look at it, because he asked the father why he didn't look at it. He never asked her why she didn't look at it.
did you receive any phone call or text message from your son, Christopher?
Yes.
And at what time was that?
I think I texted him first in the morning to see if Corey had come home. And he told me he had. I'm paraphrasing,
But did he tell you in a text message?
that was in a text message, yes.
Go ahead.
So we texted back and forth
Sorry
about,
the loud.
I asked him what time, how is he, because he had been kept up late the night before. And I, had been on the phone the night before with Chris, and I knew he had been in the hospital, and I wanted to know how he was. And Chris said when he got home, he was very tired. And I said to him, just let him go to sleep. I just assumed he was up till 1:30 in the morning as a little boy. He's probably dead tired. Just let him lay down and sleep and rest. So we went back and forth a little bit about that. And then about noontime, we texted more.
Who texted who?
I want to say I texted Chris just to see how Corey was. And then we had some real estate business to discuss. We did that. And then I heard from him later on in the afternoon that he was taking Corey to the hospital.
What time was that?
I want to say 3-ish, something in that area.
Phone call or a text?
I believe that was a phone call.
Okay.
Um,
Did he tell you why?
he didn't really know why. He
No,
said,
Did he tell you, if you remember, did he tell you why he was taking Corey to the hospital?
because he was lethargic, something's wrong with him. Something's wrong, has to take him, Took him to the hospital. My husband was at the dentist at the time. I called him to let him know something was going on. Get another phone call from Chris that, something's really wrong with him.
What time was that?
I don't know. I don't know.
You were still home in
I was
Monroe?
home.
Okay.
I was home
In Monroe.
in Monroe. And the next phone call I receive, Chris is hysterical. What did she do to him? What did he's screaming on the phone.
I'm taking a breath, but I want to talk about it. So to me, he's trying to use his parents to not get on the stand. That's my thought. I don't know that that's true, but it's like they're trying to get them to say stuff so he doesn't have to get on the stand. And he might have said that, but to me, when she dropped him off, he was fine. And there's a video that accidentally recorded, and one of the forensic pathologists, one of the medical experts testified that in that video you can hear him, like he sounds fine, and it's between that getting dropped off at 9 a.m. and going to the hospital at 3 p.m. where nobody knows what happened. I can't.
And I'm like, what's going on? And he tells me Corey passed. So I call my husband. I'm flipping out at the house. And my son Danny's home, my youngest. And I'm screaming. He comes, runs upstairs. What's going on? Thank God my husband came home very quickly after that. We got in the car and went down there. So we're calling Chris. I was so worried because he just was so adamant that something happened when he was with his mother. Something happened to him. So I said, Chris, don't go there. Don't go to their house. Don't, just please wait for us. So we left. As we're driving, my son calls me.
Which son?
Daniel, my youngest, he was home by himself. I don't know how long after this was. He calls me. He's getting phone calls at the house, on our house phone. Threats. People are, your brother's a murderer. This was like, it was ridiculous how quickly.
So when you talk about how quickly, I'm trying to develop a time frame.
Yeah.
Were you and Mr. Gregor in the vehicle that he was driving to Southern Ocean Methodist when you see that call?
Yeah, I believe so. I
I don't know why they're focusing on these people. If anyone know who these people are, you can tell me in the chat. I don't know who any of these people are.
it's like the whole thing was such
And somebody is turning paper so loudly, like here, I can hear it. I'm sorry. I don't have a way to turn that down.
we were devastated. We're crying in the car. We're calling the police in the car because no one was there. There was no police, nobody. So we're calling the police. We're trying to find out what's going on. At some point, we get to the hospital. And
Christopher there?
no.
Because
No.
he's
And
halfway to
Danny
Arkansas.
calls us again. Rebecca was at the house. And she was making threats. I just said, go in the house. Just lock the doors, go in the house. Just stay in the house.
Corey, that's the one victim.
Now, did you have any communication with Chris during this time period?
Yes,
Was it by phone or by text?
both.
When was the first communication you had with Chris? After the phone call you've already described for us.
I don't know times.
Okay.
I don't know times.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, let's use different things that happened that day. There came a time you went to the police station?
yes,
Which police station? did
I
you go
believe
to?
it was Barnegat.
Okay. Do you recall what time you got to Barnegat?
Objection. Doesn't remember any of the times, Judge.
Well,
I wasn't looking at the clock.
Recall the time you got there, she said she doesn't recall.
She was more vocal about not liking being questioned. Like she makes a lot of side comments, which is not going to be good if she does that in front of a jury. Like she makes a lot of side comments and she tries to explain a lot. To me, she seems, I wonder if Corey reminded him of like his mom. So to me, mom seems very emotional to me. The grandfather, his emotions were like he got emotional, but like it wasn't he managed it. Her emotions seem to just kind of flow to me. Those are my thoughts. That's just my opinion. And I believe because I think they said they did, but according to Brianna, they did not. I think that came out during Brianna's testimony. And so we'll keep going.
I wasn't looking at a clock. I was hysterical that my grandson had just passed. I wasn't timing things.
This is after the hospital? Yes. This is after you arrived at the hospital?
Excuse me?
This is after you responded to the hospital?
We went to the hospital. We were there for a bit. The police came. And then they asked us if we would go to the police station to give a, statement or whatever. And we agreed and we went.
Okay. Phone call with Danny. Did it happen prior to that or after that?
Oh, it was prior to that.
Was it prior to getting to the hospital?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Not the Rebecca one, the getting a phone call at the house.
the Rebecca one.
I believe that happened at the hospital.
When we were at the hospital before you went to bar.
So once again, I'm just saying it's my understanding and the testimony I saw, and some of y'all have followed this a little bit closer. It's my understanding that Brianna and her family paid for everything. That's my understanding. That is my understanding. We're gonna keep going.
Yes.
Do you remember speaking to Chris after you received that phone call?
I didn't speak to him. It was texting.
Would you text him?
I let him know what was going on.
Did you respond?
I don't think so.
Did you have any communication with him after that, Chris?
That night,
When's the next time you had communication?
I think the next time I had been texting him to let him know things that were going on, because that night, friends of ours, were contacting us to tell us there were posts on Facebook saying terrible things about Chris, saying he was wanted, giving our address out, saying,
By the way, when you were at the Barnes Police Department, did anybody tell you that they were looking for your son?
no,
Did you?
So Sarah, she is texting him because he is not answering his phone. Okay. He's driving. It's my understanding. The dad, I believe he drove to Arkansas that day from like New Jersey. I think it's New Jersey, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on the state. He drove. Like it wasn't like he drove to Pennsylvania. He didn't drive to Virginia or Maryland. He drove to Arkansas. And then he was caught. They collected his car and his phone in Tennessee because that behavior was very suspicious. Your child died and he got in his car that was parked right in front of a hospital because he didn't park in like he parked like right at almost in the middle of the street. Like he just parked there and he carried poor Corey in, and when he's like, and then he just gets in his car and leaves and drives out of state. That's my understanding of what happened. So they are texting because he's not answering any calls.
Interview the Detective Mitchell?
I gave it to a detective. I don't know. I don't recall his
Is he a
name.
tall, handsome fellow?
I don't recall.
The detective you gave the statement to, did he tell you at that moment that your son was wanted and he was a fugitive?
Oh, no.
So when you were communicating with your son, were you communicating with him the things that were happening to you, your family, and
On Facebook, yeah.
when's the next time you spoke to either Christopher or texted to him that he responded?
I believe it was the next day,
April 3rd.
April 3rd. It
About what time was that?
was probably in the afternoon.
And did you know where he was?
No.
Did there come a time where after that communication that you knew he was coming back?
Yes.
Okay, when was that?
I believe it was that night,
April 3rd.
April 3rd.
And did you help make the arrangements to get him back?
No.
Did he come back?
So I'm gonna fast forward a little bit because okay, yes, we're gonna go. Okay, so I'll just keep playing until we get to the prosecution.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. We'll try to.
Until I had no idea.
Taken into custody?
No,
Did anybody at that time tell you that he was wanted for murder?
no,
Did anybody at that time tell you he was a fugitive?
no.
Did they let him go?
Yes,
Was he in your home the next day?
yes.
So when he was stopped in Tennessee and they took his car and his phone, he was not held, like he was allowed to leave. But they did like take his phone and his car to look for any evidence.
Yes.
So Kelly, I'm just giving my thoughts and my opinion, and because the things that he's searching are things like it's looking like he's trying to see if he's going to be charged with a crime. He seemed to be worried about himself, and the nurse that was in the room trying to save his child's life described him as emotionless, and the hospital, I think they saw him a little distraught and then he just left. That has likely never happened before, where something like that happens and the person just leaves. Like he just left. Like, and so to me, ugh, and he knew that a CPS investigation had started the day before because of the bruises from the treadmill incident. I think he was worried about getting arrested. Those are just my thoughts. I don't know if that's true, but those are my thoughts. Those behaviors do not look good. They do not look good at all. So difficult. So difficult.
Did you ever,
If you watch this case over on Law and Crime, just close the comments. The comments are horrific. Denny Dawn, I know I saw you over in Law and Crime's chat because I often watch it either with Court TV or Law and Crime, and sometimes I'll chat a little bit, but like the comments are hideous because they're not monitored at all, and so I normally just close the comments over there.
speak with Christopher about taking care of his dog?
Yes.
And when was that?
We didn't speak. It was a text.
And when was that?
That was the night the car passed.
So on the 2nd.
Yes.
Do you recall about what time that was?
No.
He made arrangements for his dog? I am so mad about that. Y'all don't need to let that come in. If I was on the jury, I would be pissed. He left his deceased child at the hospital alone. And he's texting y'all about his dog?
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Stroh.
Thank you.
Let's go. So-
Hi, Mrs. Gregor.
Were you waiting in the hallway before you came in to testify?
Yes.
Were you waiting with your husband?
Excuse me?
Were you waiting with your husband, Mr. Gregor?
Prior to, yeah.
Did he get a chance to tell you about his testimony before you came in today?
He just told me he broke down a little bit. He, I just wanted to know how he was, how he felt.
Now, you said that you saw Corey on March 22nd,
Mhm.
2021, right?
Mhm.
That was a Monday?
Mhm.
So it would have been after school?
Mhm.
Maybe it's say yes or no, please.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
And when you saw Corey, you were looking at houses, right?
Yes.
You went to visit your brother,
yes,
you had dinner,
yes.
and you saw bruises on her,
I only saw one
on his face.
on his forehead.
And he told you where he got it,
Yes,
and he told you that he fell off the treadmill,
he told me he fell on the treadmill.
on the treadmill.
Mhm.
Now, you gave a statement to Detective Mitchell at the Barnegat Police Department
Mhm.
the night that Corey passed, correct?
Mhm.
That would have been April 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes,
April 2nd, 2021.
yes.
That was between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m., right?
I don't remember the time.
It was after you left Southern Ocean Medical Center,
Okay.
right? I'm
Yes.
asking you.
Yes,
Was it dark outside?
it was dark, yes.
And that statement was about 36 minutes long, right?
I have no idea.
If I tell you it was 36 minutes long, would you believe me?
If that's what you said it is, I'll believe you. Yes,
And you gave that statement with your husband, right?
yes,
And you provided the police with whatever information you could, right?
yes,
And you wanted to assist in trying to figure out where the defendant was, right?
I don't know at that time if that was foremost on my mind.
And you didn't know what happened to Corey, right?
True.
Did you ever tell the police that the last time you saw Corey, he had a bruise on his head?
I don't recall.
Did you ever tell the police that the last time you saw Corey, he told you that he fell off a treadmill?
Honestly, I don't recall.
If I showed you your statement that you gave the detective, would it help you recall if you told them?
It would, yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as S-160. Your statement to Detective Mitchell on March 2nd, 2021.
Okay.
Your husband.
You mean April?
I'm sorry, April 2nd.
Okay.
Could you tell me if that helps refresh your recollection as to whether you told the detectives that Corey fell off a treadmill or had a bruise on his head?
I don't see it.
Do you not see it because it's not there?
I guess so.
Now, wouldn't it be important for the detectives?
He looks so, in my opinion, he looks so mad the way that I think he knows his mother is uncomfortable. And I wonder if as a kid, if he tried to like keep her from being upset, not want to upset her, because he seems really like he seems really upset that the prosecutor is like asking his mom these questions. To me, he seems more emotional about this than he did during Dad's Cross. And to me, Dad's Cross was more like, to me, she's being extremely sweet to his mom. To me, the prosecutor is coming off as nice as you can. But yeah.
Looking into Corey's death to know that just days prior, he told you
Mhm.
that he fell from a treadmill.
No, because when we saw him on the 22nd, he was fine. He was running around. He was not traumatized by falling off the treadmill or falling on the treadmill.
In your opinion, right?
Because you are not an expert. If what that child experienced, he showed no signs of trauma, he didn't know that it wasn't normal for a parent to not do that. That child did not know that what happened was not okay and that it was safe to tell somebody and that somebody would keep him safe. That's my thought. Uh which makes me wonder what was happening when nobody could see.
My opinion,
Yes
my
or no, ma'am?
husband's,
Yes or no? Your opinion.
in my opinion, yes.
Now, as you sit here today, you have never seen the video of the treadmill, right?
Yes.
So your testimony is that you didn't tell the police that Corey fell from a treadmill because, in your opinion, that wasn't important at the time. Yes or no?
Yes.
And between March 22nd, 2021, and actually ever again after that, you never saw Corey in person again.
Yes.
Now, bringing your attention to April 2nd of 2021, or April 1st of 2021, you were not down in Barnegat with the defendant, were you?
No,
You were not with Corey, were you?
no,
And anything that you know about April 1st of 2021, you only know what the defendant told you,
as far as what?
as far as where Corey was and what was happening that evening. You
Yes.
only know what he told you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And as far as April 2nd of 2021, you were not in Barnegat, right?
No,
You did not go there and see Corey, right?
no,
You only know what was going on in the defendant's apartment that day based upon what he told you, right?
yes,
Now, during the statement that you gave to the police, you told them that you spoke to the defendant at 11 a.m., right?
I don't recall the time.
If I showed you your statement, would it help refresh your recollection about
I
the
might have
time?
said that, but I don't know if that was the exact time.
You spoke to the police
Mhm.
that day, April 2nd, right?
Yes,
And you told them 11 a.m.
I guess I did, yes.
Okay. And as you sit here today, years later, you've remembered throughout the course of the time that you didn't remember. Is that so?
You're asking me if what I told him I remembered that day, and now 3 years later, that's a big difference in time. I don't remember the exact time. It might have been 11, it might have been 11:30. I'm not
Is it
sure.
fair to say that you texted with your son after 11 a.m. on April
Yes.
2nd, 2021?
Yes,
And that's the first time during those text messages that he told you that he observed anything different about Corey, correct?
no, he told me in the morning when he got in that he was sleepy.
And you said that was via text?
That was texts, yes.
Okay, so in the morning was text?
Hmm.
At 11 a.m. was text?
Yes,
Noon was text?
all texts,
Okay.
yes.
And then what about 3 o'clock? Text
That's
or
when
phone
Chris
call?
called me.
That's when he called you? Are
Yes,
you sure that you didn't call him at 3
I
o'clock?
might have called him, yeah.
You said that you spoke to the defendant while he was at the hospital, right?
That's when he called me, yeah.
And that was all phone calls, correct?
Mhm.
Until the last one was the text message?
The last phone call, I believe, was when he had left the hospital.
Okay. And the last communication that you had from him while he was still in New Jersey was the text message that you described, right?
So he called me when
I'm just asking about the text
I'm
message.
trying
and the
to
last
get it
communication
ready
from
in
him.
trying to go through some.
Once it's ready, just tell me yes or no.
Okay, so he called me, we drove down there, and
Could
then
you
we
ask
were
the woman to
texting.
answer my question. If she has to process it, that's okay in her mind.
No, I'm not sure what the question is at this point.
I think she's an external processor, and I feel for her because I'm an external processor too. She's trying to. I don't know that she can think about it in her head. I think she needs to say it, but in court you have to process it inside and then say it. And so I have no hate towards Christopher's parents. I think they did, and I don't have any knowledge of them doing anything inappropriate. I understand wanting to protect your child. So nothing I say is in judgment. What I say is in looking at the facts of this case, and then I think it's very telling that they won't watch the video. I think that is incredibly telling. And I don't know that they could testify for him if they had watched the video. And I know some people think they actually did watch it, but I don't. I think they know how bad it is, and I don't think they've watched it. I think they would lose every ounce of respect they have for their child if they watched it. I think they should, but that's just my thought. Uh, that jury had to watch it, and they might play it again during the like when they deliberate. I just and I think it's telling that they couldn't handle it, Sarah. I really do. I really do. And so here I try to focus and say things in a way that's non-judgmental. It's hard on this case for me to not call Christopher a monster after seeing that video, because that's the only words that I have for what he did. And but in general, I really try to practice non-judgment, because I can see the facts and not automatically judge. What I do is I try to point out, these are the discrepancies. This is my issue with what they're saying. And I do get frustrated sometimes. So that's I do definitely get frustrated. And somebody else mentioned getting very triggered. That if you've ever had any history of physical harm, emotional harm, anything like that, that video, I had to watch something funny. I had to decompress after seeing it. I had planned to show a portion of it in the last video I did on this case, where I covered the other doctor's testimony, but I decided I could not do that to you again. I try to cover these cases in a way that's less triggering and less traumatized. Like I try, because I want us to be able to talk about the facts. And I don't want to, don't want to like trigger you all if I can. But yes, watch kittens and puppies. And if you have to bow out, please do. Next week in court, this case goes back on Wednesday the 15th and Thursday the 16th. Those are the only 2 days they have next week. And then I forgot what days they're in court that following week. But they still have a few more weeks of this trial. I think they're looking to be done maybe to closing arguments, maybe after is that Memorial Day? Yes, Memorial Day. They're looking to be done. Let's keep going.
The last communication was
Yeah.
text, is that the question?
The
Is
last
that what-
communication from the defendant
Was
while
text,
he was in New Jersey
was text,
Okay,
yes,
thank you. And that's the one that you testified about earlier with the dog,
with the
right?
dog.
Now, could you tell me what the last 4 digits of Danny's phone number are?
I don't know off the top of my head.
You don't know Danny's phone number?
It's saved on my phone as my son's name.
And you said that as you were driving down to the hospital, that's when Danny called you, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And that he was telling you secondhand about threats that he saw or heard.
Yes,
Okay. You actually didn't get any of those threats, right?
not that night, no,
Right. And you weren't home.
no,
Okay. So none of those things were firsthand to you.
no,
And you got to the hospital and the defendant was no longer there.
correct.
And then Danny didn't call you again till later on at night to talk to you about Rebecca.
Maybe, yes, okay, yes,
Okay. And you weren't there for that either.
And Danny is the other brother. So Danny is the witness's other son.
I was not,
So this is all coming from Danny.
right.
And are you aware that the defendant wouldn't let the hospital call Brianna Michelot about Corey while he was there?
I have no,
Are you aware that Brianna didn't even know that Corey had passed until 6 o'clock?
no,
And when you spoke to the police,
That broke me a little. That was like the last control. Like that really just breaks my heart, because as a mom, I would have been really, really mad, because he left and he just disappeared. Something happened. He's the only one that knows what happened. Because if I was that mom, I would be like, when I dropped her off, when I dropped him off, he was okay. He was fine. What did you do? I would be like, I would be saying all kinds of stuff. Okay. I can't.
About everything that was going on during that statement, you didn't tell them about all that information from Danny,
No.
did you? Okay.
No,
In fact, you and your husband were talking about the fact that Danny and your daughter Kimberly were fine, right?
we're fine.
So that's in her statement. In her statement, she says that her and that the children were fine. I'm going to skip ahead to the judge asking her some questions.
What you're really saying is she's saying Chris was going to be charged with murder, right?
And she was saying things along the line, and I'm paraphrasing, that you people are going to watch it, and just crazy stuff, saying crazy stuff like that.
And was there a threat to burn down your house
No,
or to assault you,
no,
assault your husband?
not directly. No.
And the wanted posters are that he's wanted for murder.
Yes. Yep.
Before you, on direct examination, Mr. Galucci was asking you questions, and he asked you about that by April 4th, Christopher's coming home, except he gets stopped in Tennessee, right?
Yes.
And you only know that because you heard that later on, right? You weren't there in
No.
Tennessee, right?
No.
And then you told him that by the next day, he was home in your house, right?
He was home on the 4th
Right. How do you remember that?
because it was Easter.
So he stopped in Tennessee after noontime. His car is seized, his cell phone is seized,
Hmm.
and you're telling us that he's back home in New Jersey for Easter on Sunday, the same day he stopped.
Yeah, if that was the day. Yes.
Or wasn't it more likely April 5th that he gets back to New Jersey?
I-
You know that in your personal knowledge, he came back on April 4th, if he stopped after 12 noon in Tennessee?
I think it was the 4th. I haven't done any research on my phone or anything to verify it, but I thought it was Easter Sunday. Him and his friend were in the house.
Counsel, any further questions? A lot of my questions.
Yes.
I'm going to skip past all those. Wait a minute. Does the judge ask her some more questions? Wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
I don't know what communication he had with Laura, but we were telling him this, these allegations are out there. And as far as we knew, they were false. No one said anything to us that he was wanted. And we
Let
were,
me ask you, does it matter if they're false or they're true at that point? You don't really know, right? If they're false
we
or
don't,
true.
we don't.
So does it matter if they're false or true? It just mattered that he
I
should
wanted
come
him
back
home.
instead of
Oh,
flee,
yeah,
right?
absolutely. I said, we wanted him home. We needed to find out what happened, and we needed him to come home.
And you agreed it was better for him to be back in New Jersey while all this was going on
Absolutely,
than to be halfway across the country.
absolutely.
Objection to halfway across the country.
Oh, to be in,
So I don't think the judge thinks they're coming across credible, though that's my thought. Y'all let me know in the chat if y'all think something different. I think the judge thinks that she's not coming across very credible. All right.
Tennessee or Arkansas, however far that is. It's not, certainly not contiguous to New Jersey, right? It's not like they
Right.
went to Philadelphia.
Right,
All right.
exactly.
Thanks. Any further questions?
Yes, Judge, can I ask some?
Okay. So some more questions back and forth, and then the judge is gonna say something. I'm gonna let the judge go.
So saying that in this case, the parents are giving opinion testimony that Christopher's being threatened, and you made it sound as if in other proceedings that you're going to burn the house down. He won't go back to his parents' house because he thought his life was in jeopardy there. But neither one of these people testified to that.
I disagree. I think it shows the state of mind of a parent who's in charge of a child who's
But
just.
the parents' state of mind.
Oh,
The
child.
parent's state of mind and what they're going to tell their child is definitely relevant.
And how do you even establish that they told the child that stuff? I mean, they barely even got that out.
They did get
Not much.
that. They did.
We know his phone's off for hours, right? We already know that. Did he even get, do we know he got those text messages?
They testified. They testified that his phones, they were very credible. They didn't testify.
So he turned his phone into airplane mode and he turned it off because he was worried about being tracked and getting caught, in my opinion, I guess. But like, because the defense desperately wants them to be able to say this, because I think somehow maybe Christopher doesn't have to get on the stand. There are a bunch of question marks that I think the jury is going to have, and I think the defense wants the parents to fill in a few of those. And I don't know that the judge is going to allow it.
To anything other than the truth about they weren't able to communicate with them, that they were trying to communicate with them, that they lost contact with them, that he wasn't answering their phones, that when they finally spoke to him, that he came back. They were honest about every one of those things. They said they saw the forehead bruise. They talked about the treadmill. They testified to what they were going through at that time and what they were trying to convey to this man, their child, and that's what was going on. And he came back.
Right, so how do you get in Corey's statement to the parents that he fell on the treadmill?
Well, I don't know. That I'm not so concerned about that statement. I'm not concerned about it. As a matter of fact, it hurts me.
Frankly, the whole,
It hurts me.
everybody knows that he fell on a treadmill anyway, because they've already seen it.
Well, I'm sorry.
Regardless.
It hurts me. I wouldn't elicit that. Why would I elicit from them that they saw Corey bruised? I wouldn't.
Well, you did it today. So
Well, I
I'm
just
asking
did
you.
it because we're in a hearing, just, dress rehearsal, we're on for here. So, but that's, I wouldn't. I probably would ask them if they saw the video. I might ask them that. I might ask them, well, Judge, I think I should be allowed to ask them whether they, what was the date, March 22nd?
All right,
On March 22nd, if they saw any bruising and what the child's demeanor was, and I will caution them to say, if, depending on Your Honor's ruling, that yes, I saw an abrasion, whatever she called it, to his forehead, and that his demeanor was, as they described it, energetic and fun, like he always is, I believe is what she said.
All right, so I'm subject to hearing from the state. I'm okay, obviously, with them testifying to what they physically saw and did with the child on April 22nd. But what exactly are you trying to elicit on April 2nd to April 4th?
What they were going through and what they were conveying to their son, and that as a result of that, he came back. He didn't keep going. They weren't making arrangements for him to flee further.
I mean, but frankly, I'm not so sure how that helps you. So the parents make clear that people are accusing him of murder and are telling him to stop fleeing in the return. So what you're there is arguably giving the state is that from the time of death on April 2nd till sometime on late April 3rd, he was in fact fleeing until his family talks and sense it to him.
Hello.
So I want to make sure what I'm exactly trying to establish for you. Because if anything, it gives me, this testimony gave me more confidence that I made the correct decision with the flight charge, because even the defendant's family was advising him that an accusation was being made against him. It doesn't have to be an accusation by the police.
That doesn't. But I think an accusation from the police and none happened would be more affirmative for them to make that request than an accusation made by Rebecca.
And I do just want to comment, this judge, I think, has been neutral because there have been times he's ruled for the defense. There has been times that he's ruled for the prosecution. And to me, he's really trying to follow the law, because if he doesn't follow the law, there's going to be issues. And it's how does this come in? And then it's going to come up, should they just subpoena the brother, like should Danny? And it's my when I saw the hearing, I thought Danny wasn't on the witness list yet, so like Danny might not even be on the witness list. the whole thing.
Controller or the rest of them people. So
I mean, but that's not as persuasive to me because obviously you have a grandparent. Grandparent knows the child's died in the hospital. In the hospital, after having come to the hospital, brought by one parent. So someone's saying, how does a healthy 6-year-old die? Oh my God, that's murder. So those aren't threats to me.
it's a threat to me. If you're a good parent, it's a threat to me. They said they didn't see the video. They said that they lived with them for a year.
Right.
David Gregor testified that he lived with him for a year, never saw him mistreat him or harm that child.
Because he had witnesses, in my opinion.
That through that
Well,
whole
you intend to
time.
elicit that?
No,
All right.
obviously you're not gonna let me.
Right. That was my next question.
Right, obviously that's not happening. So now they have no reason.
I'm not laughing, but so I like it when the attorneys bicker, like when they go back and forth with the judge a little bit, especially the jury isn't here. So this is just like this, the jury isn't here. They're just going back and forth. And he is passionately advocating for his client because I truly think Christopher is trying to stay off the stand. Like I truly think he's trying to not have to
To
testify.
believe.
All right. So you need to tell me though what specifically you're going to try and elicit between these conversations. You can't have the defendant testify through his mother or father. So how do you get in?
Are you telling me that I need to then have to call the defendant?
No, you never need to have to call the defendant.
Oh.
You can't just have the defendant testify. Certain things are present sense impressions. So if he says, I'm at the hospital, that probably comes in. I talked to my son, said he was at the hospital. And everybody knows that anyway, so it's harmless. It's not totally appropriate. We had a video of him going to the hospital. We all went to the hospital. So those things are fine. I think perhaps the mom saying he was distraught on the phone. The self-serving declaration about what did she do to him,
I don't think that
doesn't come in.
Obviously.
All right, so that's,
I'm distraught on the phone, I believe comes in.
right. She knows her son. She's talked to him all the time. She recognizes his voice and she says, how was he on the phone? He was upset. He was distraught. That's a present sense impression. I think that's legit.
Because so far most of the people have said that he was like unemotional and kind of disconnected. That's some of the testimony that's come in so far. So the defense is going to want that to come in.
It's also, there's videos that you cross-examine the nurse on, shows he's distraught. But I'm just trying to figure out about all the hearsay things. She can't testify that Danny says it's a threat. I mean, why can't Danny testify? Why don't you call Danny and say what happened?
I've been through that now after this hearing.
Because
Danny's not on anybody's witness list as far as I know. I don't know why I pressed the button.
because the characters, let's say I agree with you that yes, someone accuses your child of murder and say that's a threat.
To me it is.
Okay, then we got to find out what was exactly said. So to the extent you're relying upon that information, whoever came to the house or called the house and said something to Danny, and however that can be conveyed to the defendant, we got to figure out what was said, not the witness's opinion testimony about what she believes Danny conveyed to her.
Okay.
Okay, y'all. So I don't think so. The judge, he doesn't make a decision. To me, he doesn't end up making a decision in this. They talk on the side. Okay, so let's play a little bit at the end. Let's play the last little part and see what happens.
Ms. Strong, anything you'd like to add?
Judge, the state submits that it meets the 4-part Caulfield test.
Thank you, Mr. Galucci.
We disagree.
All right, so first, I find that the text messages have little relevance to the allegations against the defendant, assuming they have some tendency to prove or disprove any fact of consequence. It would be very minor, and the relevance and probative value would be substantially outweighed by the prejudice, which would be very difficult to overcome. Secondly, it's a totally separate kind of act. It's not similar to the offenses charged. Thirdly, there's no clear and convincing proof it actually happened. And finally, on the fourth prong, again, the prejudicial value substantially exceeds.
So that's where I say this judge has weighed, like he's ruled in fate, like things that have benefited the defense, and he's also done things that's benefited the prosecution. He's following the law from, and I'm not a lawyer, but just from what I've seen.
Any type of probative value would likely result in confusion of the issues and detraction from the facts in the case. That said, potentially could be admissible if defendant chose to testify, and if he specifically opened the door by making references contrary to the text messages, then perhaps the text message would be admissible for impeachment. If that would happen, then obviously both sides would be aware of it, and Mr. Gallucci can counsel his client about it. But at this point, I find that the state's motion is denied without prejudice, subject to defendant opening the door if he chose to testify and chose to make self-serving statement to the contrary.
Okay, perfect.
So in
Thank
that
you.
case, we don't need to come back just after lunch, correct?
Yes, Judge, thank you.
All right, so right now we're then going to be Wednesday, May 15th, right?
Yes.
All right, so feel free to reach out if you have anything you need to address before that. You want to take this back?
And so I might have skipped over. Judge probably went through it. He does a lot of back and forth, and so the judge probably did rule that the parents can testify, but the father can't say that statement that Christopher moved and that he was then unprotected. The father can't make that statement, and they're going to have to be careful with any hearsay. And this whole case is just very, very sad, very, very concerning. There were comments about Christopher's childhood, and I don't know. I do know that authoritative parenting. So there's authoritarian, and authoritarian is all rules, no love. Permissive is all love, no rules. Authoritative is balancing love and discipline. Y'all might have noticed while I was talking, like during this video, my son came in. I paused it real quick. I was able to manage everything, and my husband's home, his dad is home, and so like they're playing. My son's fine. He's 6. Yeah, he's 6 years old. And this case hits very close to home because I have a 6-year-old. He's in first grade. And my son, we have an evaluation. It's not scheduled yet, but hopefully we'll be able to get scheduled. We're on a wait list to get him assessed for ADHD. I likely have ADHD. And I say likely because I grew up in the 80s, and African American kids, really, the ones that did get diagnosed with ADHD were like throwing chairs. And I was very talkative. My mom, y'all have met my mom. She was authoritative, but she was, you didn't mess with her. Like my mom did not play. And I learned to like manage things, but I grew up feeling very dumb. I grew up feeling like there was something wrong with me, like I was different. And even in graduate school, even in college, I really struggled with time with tests. I really struggled in in a few ways. I was able to cope with it. I likely have like mild. If y'all know, my chair never stays still, but it helps me. It is like a calming, soothing thing, and so I will never just sit still during this. And as thing like I'll sip my water as testimony starts to get more triggering and all of that. But the way that I parent my child is very different from the way I was parented. And I did a conversation with my mom, and it's not court related, but my mom and I sat down. If you go to my live videos, it was probably 2 down, and it's talking about healing mother and father wounds, and a message to the cycle breaker, to those individuals that are breaking cycles of trauma. I did not. So, what my mom did to me wouldn't legally be considered trauma, but just because, or abuse, like it wouldn't legally be defined, but it does, according to the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. Any physical discipline is considered a yes on that child adverse childhood experiences study, because we know that physical discipline, it changes the brain. Yelling and screaming at a child changes the brain. Shaming children, using shame and guilt to parent, those things cause harm. And I am very passionate about that. I like giving tips and recommendations for parents. I got into this work to work with kids and very quickly realized that the adults are not okay and that I needed to shift. So I work with a lot of adults now. I still work with kids and families, but my caseload is probably 50-50 now. When I first started, it was probably like 80% kids and just a few adults. And this is a place that is safe for the neurodivergent. It's also safe for the LGBTQIA plus two spirit, all all for everybody. I also talk a lot about addressing bias and just how things can be different in the legal system. If this had been a woman that was charged with this, I do think that we sometimes view men as more violent in general. And sometimes it's harder to understand how a mom could do this to their child. I've covered a lot of testimony, a lot of hearings, a lot of court cases where the mom was convicted of the harm to the child. But uh, we'll see what the jury says. Based on what the prosecution has presented so far, in my opinion, they have a very, very, very strong case. A very strong case. And so I appreciate you all being here. And yeah, Tuesday, I'm going to do a video on the baby reindeer, on the individual Fiona. She's come forward and she's like said that she thinks it's about her, and she has thoughts, and we definitely have to talk about that. So we're going to do that on Tuesday. If you do celebrate Mother's Day, if it's a hard day, I have a very, very old video on if Mother's Day is hard. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed that. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on that video, and I am gonna have Mama on the like once a month, and we'll have to talk about we'll pick a topic, but we'll do that once a month. I appreciate you all, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.